Story 1. Syria. I went before the Civil War, and it was honestly one of the loveliest places I have ever been, with super nice, friendly people. Add to that, the food is amazing. It would break my heart to see some of the places now. Story 2. Morocco. The constant catcalling, verbal and physical harassment, racism, scamming, and overall chaos in everyday tasks like waiting in line at a grocery store. Lived there for almost a year and will never go back. Story 3. I have never had such a strong dislike for a city in my life. I was only there for 2 days before driving down to Key West. The minute you walk out of the airport, the humidity overwhelms you. Traffic is a nightmare, and the drivers are selfish, rude, and dangerous, which is notable since I have driven in Los Angeles and Boston, and I have lived in Dallas. The people are loud, attention-seeking, and obnoxious, and they express this in 2 languages. It's like someone took the worst aspects of Los Angeles and kept none of the good ones. I was there in November, and it was constantly hot and sticky. I got rear-ended within 3 hours of stepping into the city, and when I pulled over to get insurance information, everyone started honking at me as if I was wrong for putting my emergency lights on and pulling over to the side. Miami and the entire state of Florida can be very frustrating. Story 4. Las Vegas. It's really only fun if you have a lot of money just burning a hole in your pocket. I don't enjoy gambling or super crowded places in general, so there wasn't really anything there for me to enjoy. Fire Canyon State Park was cool, though, but you don't need to go to Vegas to enjoy that. Story 5. Missouri. I've never experienced so much intense road rage in my life. I still get mad just thinking about those drivers. Nobody drives faster than 50 miles per hour, and they block every lane of the road and will not move for you if you are behind them and clearly trying to drive faster. Story 6. Burlington Coat Factory. My sister and I went into one for fun, and the entire store was empty except for a single rack of randomly sized clearance coats and a lone employee at a tiny kiosk. We thought they were going out of business, but apparently the store is just simply awful. Story 7. Northeastern Ohio. I lived in an eastern suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. While growing up, it seemed like the most liberal and progressive place. I'm 73 years old now, and it seems like the region has become a conservative hellscape, and the weather totally sucks. Story 8. Texas. I hated every visit I had to make there. Too many of the people are judgmental and overly religious in all the worst ways. They're convinced Texas is the best, but most of them have no basis for comparison and know little of the world outside their state. I hate Texas culture. I dislike modern country music, don't want to attend a megachurch, or get looked at like I'm from another planet because I don't like football. My Texan stepsister regularly says things like, "Well, gotta go. Jesus is telling me I should stop at Target," or "You didn't get better faster because you didn't pray hard enough." I dislike Texas. Story 9. I didn't think of it, but yes, Disneyland was definitely a one-time experience. That place made me sick. And then just a bit south of there, Los Angeles. Why? That's rhetorical. Story 10. New Delhi. Perpetual smell of burning garbage and an ungodly level of pollution. There's also some universal unwritten etiquette on begging that while you are free to ask for money, physical contact is a no-no. Not for the child beggars here. Story 11. The United States of America, because its misguided populace has elected an administrative and a legislative branch that both represent active and existential threats to my own home and native land. In addition, its judicial branch no longer enforces the rule of law. So literally everyone within its borders is now subject to arbitrary and capricious arrest on suspicion of being an illegal. Well, anybody darker than albino, so why should I spend so much as $1 there? It would be like visiting Nazi Germany to attend the 1936 Berlin Olympics, or taking a vacation package to Imperial Japan in September 1942. Story 12. New Hampshire. Lived there for a year some years ago and have avoided it ever since. The people were rude, unfriendly, and unhelpful. There were barely any streetlights anywhere. It was extremely cheap to eat out, literally cheaper to eat 3 meals out every day than to go to the grocery store, where prices were astronomical. They think because they do not have state tax they are better off, but they do not realize everything except restaurant food costs more. Toll roads everywhere. Story 13, Vegas, or if I do, it's not going to be on the strip. Too busy for my liking. People do say going off the strip is a bit sketchy, but some of the most fun I've had has been nowhere near the strip. I'm also a nerd, so learning more about atomic bombs was great. Story 14, Angeles City, Philippines. Filthy, very obvious sex trade activities and exploitation of local women by older Western men. Terrible food, super loud people around Christmas time, and children screaming in the mornings. Story 15. Philly cheesesteaks are overpriced and overrated. The sports fans are rude, and who throws snowballs at someone dressed up as Santa at a football game has got its own Wikipedia page. Story 16. Barking Sands Beach, Kauai. 5 miles of unpaved sugarcane plantation road. The last mile is mostly sand. To reach a beach with sand so hot in mid-September that you cannot sit, lie, or play on it, and even standing or walking hurts if your shoes or sandals are too thin. Aside from a public restroom, it is empty. You cannot even get in the water because the drop-off is so steep and immediate. It is beautiful, but so is every other beach on Kauai, and the barking effect of the wind over the sand is not that interesting. Unless it has changed in the 33 years since I was there, it is not worth it. I have no idea why Encyclopedia Britannica mentioned it as a major tourist attraction back in the late 1980s. Story 17. The Florida Keys. When I first saw them in 1980, it was still pretty much old Florida. Same for 1982. But the last time I went in 2006, it was much more built up, and most of the old Florida charm was gone. Key West has been ruined by cruise ships and jet service and is just one more over-tourist destination in the world. Story 18. Izluchinsk, Siberia. A town that only existed because of a power plant that powered nearby petrochemical fields. It is very cold and gray. There is nothing to do. Street after street of drab 1950s Soviet apartments. It reportedly has one of the highest suicide rates in Russia. Story 19. My father and I went to the same restaurant every year for his birthday. We did it for 20 years. I would only visit that restaurant one day a year on his birthday. That was it. He would only visit that restaurant one day a year on his birthday. That was it. After he died, I said I would never go to that restaurant again. Story 20. Dominican Republic. Resort food may kill you. Story 21. Moscow, Russia. Can someone tell me why there are traffic jams when there are 8 lanes of traffic going both ways? And why do they have factories with smokestacks pouring out smoke and pollution right next to residential neighborhoods? I think they messed up their zoning laws. Story 22. Venice, Italy. I have nothing against the physical setting, which is fascinating, nor against the Venetian natives, though I'm unsure if I met any. The tourism business has destroyed any charm and delight of being there. People with counterfeit goods were all over, blocking key passageways with their belongings on the ground. Food in my area was criminally overpriced and of poor quality, an insult, really. The crowds were overwhelming. As soon as the cruise ships arrived, they brought endless armies of the worst kinds of tourists, ruining what had been a nice quiet morning in a beautiful place. It was reminiscent of a crowded Times Square or Disney World atmosphere, though not exclusively Americans. This kind of tourist is an international issue. Like the Chinese tour groups that rush into a museum and trample everything in their path just to get their picture of the Mona Lisa or whatever is in this place. Then, late in the evening, the tour groups returned to their cruise ships and left for their departure points. The illegal vendors selling counterfeit goods were gone, and the beggars were elsewhere. For a brief moment, it was quiet and empty, and the city returned to what it was in the early morning, beautiful and fascinating. But no, that place is not worth it. The good moments are far outweighed by the bad. Story 23. Puerto Rico. It was in poor condition before the hurricane. I visited in 2016, and the government buildings, such as the post office, looked like something from the early 1950s. Story 24. Puerto Rico. It is really depressing that the main city was dead for us unless a cruise ship comes in. Everything was either expensive and sleepy or part of a resort, and there are much better islands to go to down there. Not my kind of travel. Story 25. Naples, Italy. Stayed there for a weekend once. Trash tornadoes, literal miniature tornadoes made of trash everywhere. On the cab ride back to the airport, I stepped in human waste, which I had to brush out of my shoes with my toothbrush. Story 26. When I went, I was around 12. My dad and I went to see my grandfather. He insisted on driving, keeping the windows up to reduce drag, and not turning on the air conditioning to save gas. I have chronic headaches, and they get much worse when I'm hot and I overheat easily. I got so hot in the car that I almost threw up. I also got a horrible sunburn and had to stay in bed for 2 days. The temperature in the house was above 80 degrees. It was the most miserable experience I've ever had. I know it wasn't Florida's fault, but I have no reason to go back, so I won't. Story 27. Jamaica, awful food. Too many old ladies and young guys walking hand in hand. True love, of course, and the taxi drivers talking about their big bamboos. Story 28. Boston. Some person with a dent in their head and on a considerable amount of crack or some type of heroin came over and wanted to have sex with me and my family or something weird. Turns out my brother made him back away, as he is skilled in martial arts. Story 29. Trigger warning. Sexual assault. My old college campus. I was sexually assaulted twice while attending college there. I had no protection from either rapist while on campus. No restraining orders. The police just said I lied and refused to investigate further. The former college president manipulated the firing of Title IX coordinators yearly, so he would never get caught for inappropriate relationships with students. That led to the death of one of the female students my freshman year. Interestingly, once I graduated, he retired. I deeply dislike the college I attended because of my post-traumatic stress disorder. When I graduated with my degree, it felt like giving a huge middle finger to the school. I want to return to college at a different school so I can get a job I truly love and start living instead of just surviving. Story 30. Bahrain. I was in the Navy for 11 years and went to about 16 to 18 countries. Bahrain was the only port I ever visited where I left the base to get a cab, immediately had someone try to run me over, and went back to the base for the next 5 days over Christmas. This was back in 2003, so it might be better now, but I did not like that place. Story 31. The McDonald's around the corner from my house. I only go there for breakfast sometimes. No matter what I order, I get something else that I didn't order. But it's McDonald's. Everything tastes good and the same for breakfast. So, for my last visit, I pulled up to the speaker and said, "Just surprise me. I have $8. And I swear, I got exactly what I wanted. It was weird, but I was stoned and it was delicious." Story 32. El Paso, Texas. Have traveled throughout Asia, Africa, and South America. The place we stayed at had a bullet hole in the window with signs everywhere about not letting people follow you into the building, making sure doors shut behind you, and so on. Have never felt so unsafe. Story 33. My grandma's house. When she died, my cousin got her land, tore down the house, and put an ugly shed in the middle of the property instead. But I have some sentimental items of grandma's and a lot of good memories, and the knowledge that she would be absolutely aghast at the right turn that branch of the family took in 2016. So I don't need the house, and maybe it's just as well grandma wasn't around to see what became of 1/3 of her descendants. Story 34. Oh God. Versailles was so packed. One way only, and just god-awful. We went to the gardens to get away and had a snack at the cafe there. We were served the worst food we have ever had by a coked-out waiter who tried to overcharge us and ended up screaming at us until we left. Not worth a day trip in France. Story 35. Jamaica. The people were not nice. They clearly resented us and struggled to put on basic smiles. I love to travel and I love different cultures. I've never felt more unwanted. A close second was France, though. Story 36. Seattle. It's an incredibly overpriced place. I will miss the mountains, though. If King County wasn't there, it would be the most beautiful place in America. Story 37. South of the Mason-Dixon line. I used to think it was a bad joke, the notion of the Deep South. Now, I see that these states have such deep-rooted issues. You can almost feel the warm glow of hate growing in this country. So sad. Story 38. Florida. The whole state is backward and full of child molesters, transients, sex offenders, drugs, and flying gigantic cockroaches. No thank you. Good riddance. Story 39. Sandpoint, Idaho. Never have I seen a greater concentration of wealthy, vapid, Trump-loving, selfish individuals who do so much cocaine you have to wonder if it's even any good. The place is filled with young people who are so concerned with money and image they don't know, or care maybe, how disgustingly awful they are. Idaho itself is a pretty place, but all the people I've met who live there have much more than a screw loose, though. I also had a chance to see a handful of their local summer concerts. Talk about the worst bands you could imagine for the low price of $100 per ticket. Oh, and you probably will only get one single 45-minute set from the bad band. Story 40. Los Angeles, what a dump, and it takes you at least an hour to get anywhere. Then, when you get to wherever you're going, there are hordes of people to get through, and whatever it is you're going to do is expensive. So yeah, I'll pass. Story 41. Most places in the United States have metaphorical ups and downs, but not there. People say there's nothing bad about it, but there's also nothing good about it aside from the food, which you can get elsewhere. It's the kind of place your grandma lives and says you can visit, but you'll be bored. The architecture is depressing. Feels bland even when it looks nice. There is no good nature there compared to most of the United States or even the rest of New England, but people who are from New York City think there is, so that's why it retains some popularity. Being stationed there was terrible. Every boring person who has standards so low that they like it. Crossing the line into Rhode Island always feels so much better.